As pathetic as it is to see characters like Varys on screen now, with no story to tell, no plot to pursue, just really nothing to do but stand around and make one-liners and witty, aimless observations on a soundstage, it's even more pathetic to come on YouTube and see the people who are at the intellectual deep end of the Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire commentary demi-monde, see the people at the intellectual deep end trying to spark, trying to muster up something meaningful and insightful to say in response to that aimless, pointless, poorly written script. Now, I remember these same channels. I remember these same dudes, in a few cases, these same ladies, 7, 8 years ago, whatever it's been now. Guess it's been more because they had a long gap between these seasons. I remember seeing you guys years ago, and when you came on and did like explaining episode 4.2, when that was your video, there was actually something to explain. There were actually things like insinuated in the text that the audience might not catch or might not have understood. Like you might not have understood it if you hadn't read the books. And in some cases, even if you had read the books like several years ago, like, oh, you don't realize, like at this point, there's a bit of an awkward silence, but this is why. Oh, at this point, they're alluding back to this other war that happened before. And yes, let's keep it all the way real. Some of what needed to be explained in earlier seasons was just the product of poor filmmaking. The Battle of the Fist of the First Men, it's like an example of collective hypnosis. We've all convinced ourselves that they actually showed that battle in the TV show, but you never really saw the battle. There was some misdirection. So I can remember that. I can remember myself going and looking at the internet like, what? What was, they were in the snow and then this, and then they show a guy on a horse and then they cut to something else like, oh yeah, that was the Battle of the Fist of the First Men. It was too expensive or too difficult to film. So sure. But in the past, there were actually things to explain. There were characters with complex intentions and agendas to explain. And now there is nothing to explain. And I see people trying to come up with a 20-minute video. Some of them are 2-hour videos where all you're doing is reiterating the text. And the text is really thin. And there is no subtext. I mean, give you an example. I think this is season 1. Maybe I misremember. This could have been season 2 or season 3. But early in the show, Varys takes Tyrion Lannister aside and shows him a corpse nailed away in a coffin. And the corpse actually, horrifically, magically, seems to be still moving and alive, right? And Varys tells this strange and complex story about how he was involved with black magic, and he was a young actor, and this man purchased him as a slave, right? And there are various things that are evocative and interesting about this. It connects to the issues about slavery and liberation. It connects to the politics of King's Landing at that time. But most fundamentally of all, we don't know if this is true. If it were true, what is motivating Varys to disclose this to Tyrion? Like, in a sense, if everything he's saying is true, then it's bad writing for him to be telling Tyrion, because he's just meeting up with Tyrion, someone who's basically his enemy. At many, many points in the book, Tyrion threatens to murder Varys, and even in the TV show, he lies to Varys and manipulates Varys and uses threats to Varys and so on. He has a difficult, rocky, and dangerous relationship with Tyrion in a very difficult and dangerous political situation. Why would he just invite Tyrion? Hey Tyrion, can you come into this cellar with me? And I'm going to tell you like the greatest secret of my life and something about my psychology and something that links me to black magic and something about my origin and where I come from in Essos and everything. What motivates the scene? What does he have to gain? And even still, how does it change Tyrion's plotline? Where is it going when he tells him this? Now, this may be one of those plot threads that in the books that George R. R. Martin never gets back to. George R. R. Martin is not vegan. There's like a big ticking clock until he hits his next heart attack. We all know what's coming. The last film footage or something, he's lost weight. He's actually lost a little bit of weight since the last time I saw him. So we're hoping he's getting on a slightly healthier diet. Like George, all is impermanent. So there's some plot threads that he may never get back to just due to lack of time on this planet, but there's some he may never get back to because it's a sloppily written, largely improvised, inspirational and inspiring work of literature, but it's not that tightly written, guys. People who have green eyes in one scene have blue eyes in another scene. There's the female character who has narrow hips in one scene and has wide hips in another scene. It is what it is. It's not written that tightly. There's no reason to assume we're ever going to get a resolution, even to something as obvious as whose dagger was this? The question, the cat's paw mystery. He thinks he's sealed it up, but it's really not sealed up. It really doesn't make sense. There are a lot of things where if you get out the graph paper and chart what happened and why, even in the books, it'll never be sealed up. But here's my point. There was a time when you could watch that show, and there's this intriguing, mysterious, and highly motivated set of dialogues between Tyrion Lannister and Varys, other characters too, of course, and you think, what's propelling these characters forward? Where are they going? Why are they doing this? Well, and again, is he telling the truth or is he lying? Looking back at this episode, 8.2, season 8, episode 2, did anyone lie in the whole episode? Is there even the possibility that anyone would lie in the whole, like, is it something you can reflect on and be like, wow, I wonder if when this character or that character was just standing there doing psychological striptease, just standing there bearing their emotions while they're, I wonder if they were trying to manipulate the other person or something. There's no longer any scope for any kind of politically motivated or even personally motivated manipulation that would justify doing a podcast or doing a YouTube video. In a very real sense, the writing is now so bad that I feel there is nothing to say. So this is not just complaining about my own creative exhaustion as a viewer who decided to come on and make YouTube videos. In terms of the aesthetics of the show, because of course some people who just want, what they say, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. Some people who want to have something nice to say, they retreat to talking about the aesthetics and the spectacle. The aesthetics and the spectacle. But for me, this only redoubles the nature of the failure throughout the show. You have people standing in a large room with a crowd of witnesses, communicating across the room in a whisper, speaking at a lower tone of voice than I'm speaking now, lower volume than I'm speaking at now, and their voice just clears across the room with no problem, and nobody comments. They say something that's outrageous or provocative, and all the people in the crowd standing remain dead silent. Nobody sneers or laughs when the Kingslayer talks about keeping it. Nobody challenges that. In season 1, 2, 3, or 4, there would have been noise from the crowd. There would have been the dynamic sense that this is a feudal society with many people with many motivations going in many directions. There would have been someone like Littlefinger there with some agenda, trying to twist the court case, trying to twist the trial, one way or another. And there would have just been skepticism and, mystery and intrigue and doubt, and there would have been something to talk about. And you know what? I mean, I don't think I'm giving too much credit to George. I think there would have been something meaningful there too. Something meaningful, whether about slavery or feudalism or politics or the nature of hierarchy or being a servant all your life. Just today, walking to the grocery store, I was thinking of all these ways I could have made that scene more meaningful, even if I was stuck within the structure of scene by scene what happened in this episode. All these ways in which I could have made the structure of the scenes with Jon Snow, but working within the same structure even, or if you can go outside the structure, you do all kinds of things. So there's another YouTube channel called The Dragon Demands. And he likes to complain in a somewhat overwrought manner about bad writing on the show. I think we should just briefly recognize what it is we mean by good writing. Today in 2019, the preeminent, most influential source text for what is good writing is a book called Save the Cat, a guide to screenwriting. So I didn't have the author's name. Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. This book has been so influential that many people criticize movies now, serious film criticism, by pointing out the ways in which it's following the formula in the book. Now, I remember something I said years and years ago. Americans, this is something unique to American culture. What Americans like to see is ordinary people doing extraordinary things and extraordinary people doing ordinary things. So, to give you an example, it's intriguing if you see Superman struggling with his relationship with his girlfriend. You see Superman coming down from the heavens, literally and figuratively, and having to walk into a shop and buy tampons for his girlfriend, and he's confused with it. Sorry, I'm supposed to, do these have wings? I want, that's interesting. That's why? Because it's Superman, right? If it's just some guy, it's not interesting. That's an extraordinary person doing an ordinary thing, struggling with an ordinary problem. And the American audience and American culture immediately sympathizes with, immediately relates to an ordinary person thrust into a situation of extraordinary responsibility, extraordinary challenge. So you get a sense of someone's ordinariness, that they're just another peasant. In Game of Thrones context, they're the guy working behind the counter when Superman comes in. But they've ended up, being in charge of something terrifying, something with tremendous consequences and tremendous difficulty. Save the Cat, it talks you through as a screenwriter how to give a sense of someone's capability, someone's competence. To me, in this episode, so many times we're told that Tyrion Lannister is brilliant. Show, don't tell. When have we seen Tyrion doing something brilliant? Was it 6 years ago now? Was it because one season is 1 year? It's been an incredible long time since we saw Tyrion do anything inspiring or brilliant, let alone, even since he said something witty, witty or charming or insightful has been a while. But, there would have been so many ways to structure even this episode around showing Tyrion Lannister, whether you show him as ordinary or extraordinary, Tyrion Lannister rising to the extraordinary challenge of, he's a dwarf, he's despised because everyone in the North hates House Lannister. They've just been at war with House Lannister for years. And he's got to walk around in the mud and give people orders that will save their lives and say, no, dig the trench here, whatever it is. I'd like it if he was doing something really brilliant. This is incredibly easy, right? Tyrion Lannister could be standing there saying, hey guys, if there's one thing I know, it's wildfire. If there's one thing I know, it's how to set up a trap with fire to burn the enemy. This enemy is uniquely vulnerable to fire. This is my background. I did in King's Landing. I was in there. And then his challenge is getting people to listen to him, right? And there's none of that here. Everyone stands in silence, even though we have one scene indicating that Tyrion and Jaime are not, well respected. It would be so easy to write something like that. Jon Snow has come back from abroad. He's come back from meeting his new queen and possibly his new bride. All he does is stand around like a model in a soundstage. He just stands around with blank expressions on his face. We don't get to see him doing anything, showing either extraordinary ability, showing his capability, showing that he's a hero for the audience to look up to, nor do we see him struggling from the position of being an ordinary guy. Hey, he was a teenager. His boss got killed on the job. Through a bizarre circumstance, he got elected leader of the Night's Watch. He was terrible at it. He was killed on the job. Somehow he kept failing upward. He kept failing and getting promoted, and now he's king of half the continent. He doesn't have any kind of training or education for this. Couldn't we see him, again, either would be good. If we saw him struggling with taking that responsibility, that would be great. On the other hand, if you saw him just being amazing at it, just, wow, I guess I'm a natural. Oh, gee, maybe it's because Rhaegar Targaryen was my father or whatever. If we saw him doing anything extraordinary, and there's none of that. So again, these kinds of basic questions of eliciting the audience's interest, their sympathy, showing the capability or heroicness of the characters, of showing, a character like Jon Snow. At no point in these first two episodes do we see him caring about people who are starving or people who've lost their homes, or even the Umbers, the Umber clan. They've lost their lives and they've lost their homes and whatever. Maybe there are a few. That would be, again, so easy to write. There'd be a few refugees who show up, and you show him really caring. Okay, this makes him heroic. This makes him interesting. Again, this is exactly the stuff that's in the screenwriting manual, Save the Cat. It's not genius. It's not brilliant. It's the level of competence we now take for granted in how Hollywood scripts are created, how TV shows are created. And I think there is an inevitable tendency in the arts to want to rebel against that. So to wrap this up, we'll say, I actually disagreed with this other YouTube channel, The Dragon Demands. I disagreed with him on the Battle of the Bastards episode. So that was one season ago. It's a big battle, and it made no sense, and it went nowhere. And of course, he is factually correct. he has pointed out the whole chronology of how they started with a certain script, and there were very irresponsible decisions made by the production, by the showrunners, as they call them, very irresponsible decisions made, and that forced them into a corner where if there were any delay in shooting at all, they couldn't complete the script, and what do you know, it rained. It rained sometimes. And so at the last minute in the editing room, they had to take a bunch of scenes that didn't make any sense and cope with missing scenes and missing chunks of the script, and in effect come up with a new script after the 11th hour. And it was a mess. But you know what? If you watch that episode as it is today, and you compare it to the kind of morally symmetrical, plotting, carefully planned script that was there, I think actually the way that episode turned out is more meaningful, precisely because it defies those conventions. Don't get me wrong. I understand. It's a product of chaos. But what you ended up with in this bizarre, meaningless battle, in the Battle of the Bastards, you just see bodies writhing in the mud, and nobody knows who's going in which direction, and everyone suffers and everything. And then it's all for nothing because another army shows up. And that also makes no sense. It's very poorly written. Don't get me wrong. But it's like, wow, here is actually an artistic statement about war. That war doesn't work like a well-written movie plot. That war, people... we only see, again, in terms of making John a sympathetic character or hero, you only see John failing and failing and failing. He makes the wrong decision at every single step up to the battle. He survives the battle. He's a very good swordsman, but terrible leader, terrible king. Every stage leading up to the battle, and he wins anyway. He makes all the wrong decisions, and they're outnumbered, and there's just mud, and that's it. And it's not susceptible to analysis. So that's one case where I have to disagree. That the sheer sloppiness of the Game of Thrones production ended up making a kind of interesting, eccentric, and challenging antidote to the formula of standard Hollywood filmmaking. But you have to really understand the art form to transcend the boundaries of the art form, and what we're seeing here in season 8 and the vast majority of episodes for years and years and years now is not a group of competent screenwriters or competent filmmakers transcending the conventions of the art form. They're people who have not mastered the conventions of the art form. They're people struggling with the basics of storytelling. And that's all we've got. I said in the video immediately before this, it's almost as if there was a really great writer who gave them a series of books to adapt, and then they just ran out of books to adapt. But it's even more bizarre to say that, like, they had no more books, they had no more script, and now they're filling screen time by just having characters stand in silence and stare into each other's eyes. Game of Thrones Season 8. It really is that bad.
I mean, really. People like to disrespect my crew, but the fact is that you know my name and I don't know you.
I really liked the part in that video that you just recorded where you were actually providing real examples of how the writing could be better. Yeah. I think it's easy to say, oh, this is so poorly written, I could write a better scene. But when you actually provide examples, I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. That would have made it more meaningful. And I just want to say at the end there, you said that the screenwriters seem to be relying on staring into each other's eyes. Like, yep. I really do feel that maybe it's a symptom of long-running TV shows that the last season seems to always be like really reliant on emotion, like the viewer's supposed attachment to all of these characters. It's especially
in this case, it's literally nostalgia for earlier seasons where they actually they're actually shouting out events to, oh, remember when this happened in season 2?
Yeah, right, exactly. And I was just thinking of the one scene that the stares with this episode seemed to just draw out for so long when Brienne was being knighted. Right. This was really drawn out and dramatic, and like you said, there were things that if anybody actually cares about the show, they didn't name all of the 7. They said the 7 gods. Yeah, it's like, why did you cut that out? Like, why not do all of that and cut out a little bit of the staring into each other's eyes supposedly meaningfully? But yeah, and like, you know, all the gathering around the fireplace of the different characters that we've seen throughout the season. It really just seems to be relying on nostalgia, emotional attachment to these characters. So I don't know, like, what do you think about this? What do you think about how to end a show like this?
Look, this was a show where magic once mattered. Why does Jon Snow never show us any sign or symptom that he's a Targaryen, that by blood he's linked to the dragons? You know, that'd be so easy to write. And then it would be interesting. You could have that before he's confronted by Sam, or you could have it after, that Sam tells him this. And then, you know, Jon Snow says to Daenerys, you know, before your dragons hatched, did you have dreams about them? Did you have dreams about them in the egg? And she's shocked. She says, you know, yes. Yeah, why? Yeah. And he says, because I've been having those same dreams. He said, you know, let me show you something. I keep having dreams that there's a dragon egg here. And they go down into the pits beneath Winterfell, whatever they're called, into the crypts. And he digs through the dirt, he moves a stone, and he reveals a dragon egg. He says, it was coming to me in my dreams that there was a dragon egg buried down here.
Yeah.
You know, and he picks it up, and they relate to, and they know whether he's confronted with it or not, and like that they both have some kind of connection to the dragons. Like, oh, you know, you didn't know this. And again, it's show don't tell. You don't have to unpack any of it. He doesn't even have to tell her, oh, you know, I've figured out that my ancestry by blood, I have some connection to the dragons and to the Targaryens. Like, you know, you could have a whole sequence of things. You could have built it up over several seasons. Because all we've been shown about him in his appearance, in the magic he has, his connection to the wolves and everything connects him to,
right?
You know.
Yeah, that's true.
Everything connects him to House Stark, that he's the blood of House Stark, which I guess he partly is via Lyanna. I get it from my mother. But, you know, so what? I mean, you could, you know, if you wanted to do it in a non-supernatural way, you could have it in terms of his political characteristics, or even, like, you know, he's naturally a great musician. You know, it's like, oh, you know, no one in House Stark plays music, but always I was great at playing, and you know, oh, okay, I get it from Rhaegar Targaryen. He doesn't have the hair or the eyes of Rhaegar Targaryen. Yeah. Nothing about him is like Rhaegar. So couldn't there be something? Now, again, I think the connection to the dragons is probably more compelling for the audience than he picks up a piano and knows how to play them keys, you know. Oh, that was Rhaegar's piano. That's not as cinematically compelling. Yeah. But no, I mean, you know, and again,
in this series, like in the TV show, what does it mean to be a Targaryen? Because in this same episode, episode 2,
there should be a meaningful answer to that question. Yeah. There isn't. There should be. Yeah.
Right. In this episode 2, there was a scene with Sansa and Daenerys, and they were, you know, having a heart-to-heart about Daenerys becoming the new queen because she fell in love, you know, who's tricking who into, you know, going to Winterfell. You know, Daenerys says that Jon is manipulating her as opposed to, you know, she's manipulating Jon. And she says what's supposed to be, I think, meaningful in the context that, you know, women are good leaders. Like, you know, you can be a good leader like me. Like, I'm a good female leader. And we haven't really seen Daenerys being a good female leader. No. And if we have, it wasn't for a long time. You know, like
I think all the female leaders, Daenerys and Cersei and Sansa, the main way they demonstrate their leadership is through costuming. They let the costume department do the acting. Yeah. I'm standing here dressed like Darth Vader. Therefore, I'm a great leader. Therefore, that's about it.
Cersei's
standing.
The first episode there was Cersei.
Yeah,
she really is like a Darth Vader character now.
Yeah.
Her costume also looks that way. She doesn't look anything now like, you know, the beautiful, most beautiful woman in the world is supposed to be what Cersei's description. I'm not like faulting the actress. Of course, the actress is beautiful. It's just like the way that you know, it doesn't really follow with what, you know, House Lannister is supposed to be, House Targaryen is supposed to be.
Right. And the books also, I think, draw attention to that, the tragedy of choosing your leaders based on who's good looking and who has the right bloodline. I mean, because Cersei Lannister is a terrible ruler. Yeah. But so in a different way at this point in the books, so is Daenerys. Daenerys is not a good ruler either. So
yeah, I'm sorry. I just keep going back to the idea that the writers do just seem to be relying on like the audience expecting the audience to care about these characters.
yes,
Asha's brother, I'm forgetting his name right now. Theon, yeah. So Theon shows up, and it's there's this sentimental reunion of Sansa, and I don't know. I just think it could have been more meaningful if she would have been like, hey, why did you burn our like confront him about this rather than having this teary, because I don't think she's seen Theon in
a while.
Yeah, right, since Winterfell was burned to the ground. Yeah, how did Winterfell get rebuilt, by the way? I mean, sorry, I don't I agree with you, like there are things like the continuity errors are not so much of the problem. When you're doing a TV show, it can't be perfect,
right.
But what?
Well, right. I mean, what? Okay, let me give you a parallel. What if? Okay, in a perfect world, the continuity errors would matter. It would matter that Sam managed to walk there from Old Town in less time than it took the zombies to walk from the Wall to Winterfell,
right.
And then the same amount of time it took all these other people to arrive from all over the world, and like the sea voyages back from Essos to. I mean,
Cersei isn't showing.
Cersei's been pregnant for 4 months.
Her brother is all the way to Winterfell already.
Right, that's right.
Went on horseback to Winterfell.
So right, she's been pregnant for at least as long as it took her brother to walk to Winterfell, and for a boat to go from King's Landing to Essos and back. And there are a lot of holes. But so in a perfect world, there would be no such plot holes. However, what if they were abandoning the book and producing a show full of plot holes because they were really profoundly, sincerely, thematically interested in just focusing on war, on the morality of war? That could be a great show, and we'd all be willing to overlook the plot. We'd be like, well, you know what? It's really sloppy writing. There's really no way to put it. But you know what? These guys show a real passion for dealing with war and its consequences. What if, instead, what if there are all these plot holes, but you could tell the authors really wanted to deal with the upstairs-downstairs dichotomy, the relation between masters and servants. The fact that there are these people in Jon Snow's life and Daenerys' life who've been with them, supporting them, and they don't really get nothing for it. The peasants and servants, that's the relationship between aristocrat and servant. That could be a fantastic drama. Back in season 1, season 2, Daenerys had recognizably some of the same servants around her all the time, Jiqui and so on, her blood riders and so on, who've ceased to be referred to and have ceased to be seen. And this is what you're expected to do your whole life with no reward and no advancement and possibly no pay and so on. Okay, so what about that relationship? You could have a show that's really meaningful and moving and has a kind of political content and social commentary because they're interested in that. Now, I wouldn't be interested. They could, in theory, do a show that was entirely focused on the romantic element that really nailed that, where the romance element was really great. I think you can't compare them to something perfect. I don't think there's one romance on this show today, season 7, season 8, that is as well realized as the romance between Superman and Lois Lane in the original Superman movie, which I think is 1978, 1979. And again, it's not a masterpiece. They're incredible. So whether it's something social, something political, it could be something political with a capital letter P. Could be talking about, it could be something political on that small personal scale of, hey, you're the guy who grows the corn, and me, because I'm born with this last name, I eat the corn, this, it could be some of that, and it could be the romance. There could be something the writers are focused on and passionate about, and where that's what they're delivering. And then we might be inclined to overlook all these holes.
Right.
But there's nothing. There's just nothing. It just feels like such a meandering, directionless, poorly written, cash grab. I don't have other words for it,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, reflecting upon it, the only romance that seems to be, I don't know, having the semblance of like genuine romance is between Grey Worm and the
Grey Worm
Missandei. Yeah. Even that in that scene, like we got her saying like, oh, I wish I could go to Noth. Like the viewer's supposed to remember where Noth is. Like,
remember Noth from season 3 when it was mentioned once.
Yeah. It's just in some ways the show seems to be trying to appeal to like a mass audience, but then there'll be like they'll sometimes have these callbacks to very particular moments, not in the book or in the series. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to add, but
look, I people, the other critics, especially the critics here on YouTube, they're praising this episode by saying it's an examination of kind of fear and terror when waiting for the siren. I don't think there was any examination of that, and that's a pretty well worn, library. Yeah, pretty well worn, shelf of the library. Especially with something like World War I. Waiting in the trenches and the horror of, waiting for death to come in war or something. There have been a lot of kind of masterpieces of film and book, or what have you. And this is not one of them. I also don't feel, sorry, you're mentioning romance. Is Brienne supposed to be in love with Jaime Lannister? If so, it's not well written or well realized. You could make a whole list of all the different pairings of people. Right. There were other things that would have been easy to cash in on. And again, there isn't even any comedy in the show anymore. But if you wanted to give Varys something to do, or any of those other characters too, you could discover that the Red Woman is hiding within Winterfell. She's wearing an assumed identity or something. And they track her. And she's there for good reason. She's there because she wants to help Jon Snow. Jon Snow sent her away. And she's actually, you could have a little subplot that there's so many things that easily could be written in that would make it actually, interesting. But again, all that stuff. Sorry, I didn't even suggest this. You could take the religion seriously. Nobody cares that Jon Snow died and came back from the dead. You could easily write a whole show where people are really seriously interested in and find it compelling. That, the people within the show find it compelling and the writers find it compelling. Like, hey, it transforms the way peasants regard this man, that he died and came back from the dead. Or where people are really sincerely struggling with, hey, we used to have this religion where we worship the trees, and then this new religion arrived, the religion of the god of fire, and they started performing miracles, and they brought Jon Snow back from the dead. Now that's transforming the kind of psychological, emotional, and religious and cultural background. Those are big, interesting themes, and the Ironborn have their own gods and their own beliefs. There's a lot of material there that could be really compelling, and that then we might be inclined to say, well, the fact that the plot really doesn't make sense, and that, the amount of time that passes between events is completely ridiculous, and so on. Well, we can overlook that because at least there's some really meaningful reflection on this religious world building that was built up over such a long time. Yeah. But today, there are no excuses to be made for that. There's nothing in the other side of the balance. There's nothing in the other side of the scale.
Right. Yeah, I just was, when we were watching the most recent episode, you said that the red-haired character, I think his name is Tormund.
Yes.
Yeah, you said that in the book he was known for his japes.
Yeah. It's actually funny in the book.
Actually funny, yeah. And you actually could have had the director instructing him to say his lines in a funny way, about drinking the milk of a giant. Yeah, it could have just been a joke, but it just left people with this awkward silence, and then the Onion Knight is like, oh, well, I guess I'll have that drink, really just relying on
I know.
all these people are together in one room, it's great.
Yeah, look, there's comedy, but there's also tragedy with those same characters. Yeah. So both we're going to comment on Tormund and on the man who's missing a few fingers, Davos. So there's a dialogue. These are all very brief in the books. The books are so long, but a lot of these scenes are really brief, where Jon and Tormund have this dialogue in which Tormund makes a lot of jokes, and they're funny, they're genuinely humorous. And Tormund makes some joke. I think he makes a joke with the size of his penis or something. And then and Jon Snow laughs. Says, "Oh, Tormund, you haven't changed at all. It's been some relatively long time. So, you haven't changed at all." And Tormund, he immediately becomes very choked up with emotion. He says, "Yeah, I have." He said, "No, you're wrong. I've changed." And he says, "My son died, just the other day. And a few weeks ago, my other son died, in the war, in circumstances in the war. I think one of his kids became a White Walker, became a zombie, and he had to kill him himself. He had to put him down, And, it's like, no, John, I've changed. I'm really scarred." Davos, the fellow who's missing some fingers, Davos has various complex things about his character, including his commitment to religion in the books. But I think 3 of his sons have died. More. He had a lot of kids. He has a wife and a large number of kids, and several of them have already died in the plot.
Yeah.
And in this show now, he has nothing to do. He has no motivation. He's going nowhere.
It's
and there's stuff that's meaningful to reflect on that. And even if you wanted to have a romance between him and Missandei, which I'm for in principle, it should have that weight, where it should be like, hey, this is a man who had 8 kids or something, and 3 or 4 of them are already dead, and he doesn't think he's ever going to see his wife again, and he wants you, and he knows you already got a man, and your man ain't got no dick, and he's got a dick, and he's here to compel. That could be a compelling storyline. Davos steps up and seduces like 28-year-old Missandei. So she's a fully grown. In the books, Missandei is a totally different character, but on the TV show, she's a fully grown woman, and okay, like that's that could be. But you'd have to have that agony and that vulnerability and that suffering behind it. You have to put the pieces together. And again, I said this to you, I think, off camera last time. What if Cersei Lannister was responding to being seduced by this pirate captain with some real vulnerability? What if she was saying to him, don't leave me, everyone's left me, my father is dead, my twin brother abandoned me, everyone I loved and relied on is gone, my own son committed suicide, which has never been mentioned in one line of dialogue. My son threw himself out the window, everyone else I cared about was killed in a terrorist bombing that she herself devised. Whether or not she admits that, the city I knew is gone, the family I loved is gone, all 3 of my children have been murdered, don't leave me. And even if she doesn't love him, because sometimes a woman is not in love, but she wants a man to be there for her and be strong for her, you could have a really compelling, really vulnerable Cersei. Again, guys, this is stuff writers come up with around a table. Well, what if she was vulnerable? And then at the opposite extreme, sorry, just to give a gloss on the same screen, the same possibility. And again, guys, I'm not a professional writer. I'm just better than these writers. This is the sort of thing you talk about at a table reading or at a writer's meeting. Writers' work should be at a workshop stage, not at the table reading stage. Because, okay, what about at the opposite extreme? What if she responds to this and she's completely cold? She doesn't care. Like, she's broken. She's past it. Like, what if, she takes this pirate king aside and says, okay, you want to sleep with me? Okay, guess what? This is who you're sleeping with. I buried 3 of my own children this year. I don't give a fuck. I feel nothing, And you know what? My own brother, my twin brother, just stabbed me in the back and went to join the other side in this war, and I feel nothing. So you know what? You want to have sex with me? I'm going to feel nothing, and you're nothing to me. And when this is over, I can kill you too. Like, you could take her to that extreme instead, where instead of vulnerability, there's a total lack of vulnerability, and show her as someone who's powerful, but pathologically powerful, and and then build that up, and then show her and show how she moves, and she's got to have some other people around her. Then you've got to have some minions and peons she's moving around, where she's not just standing there alone, but she's got people who respond to that energy, and where she's directing on. Show her, really make her powerful. And where she's like, okay, little man, okay, little pirate, you want to come off your boat and come sleep with me? Well, guess what? Guess what kind of monster you're sleeping with. That works too. So again, I could keep going. You come up with like 6 different possibilities that are powerful, and that also advance the plot, and that also give consequences to earlier events. So sorry, one thing leads to another. But I said to you just while we were watching it, oh yeah, remember when the Hound? So a different character, Sandor Clegane. Remember when he had a religious experience and it changed his character? That happened at least twice. There were 2 different significant religious experiences. He had his life saved by the faith of the 7, and then he had his life transformed by the fire god and so on. Like, okay, he was supposed to go through some kind of transformation, and here he is, the same character, or worse. It's a worse written, shallower version of who he was in season 1. He doesn't even look impressive anymore. Again, he's just sitting there getting drunk against the wall. In season 1, we saw him standing in full armor, and the whole crowd regarded him as awesome. His first sword fights in front of a crowd back in season 1, probably not remember. It's a long time ago. He fought against the Mountain. at a joust, and the whole crowd was impressed. You know, he just looked amazing in armor, and he was this amazing. When he walks around castle, nobody's impressed to see him. Nobody says, "Wow, there's the Hound." Do you know he was the greatest? He was or is the greatest swordsman in the whole country. Like, he's this great. He just looks like another drunken hobo hanging out at the wall. And but the point is, there were no consequences for, hey, this is the guy who won the greatest tournament at King's Landing a couple of years ago. This is this guy who stands 6'6" in armor and is just this amazing, you know. But this guy who's fought in so many battles and everyone finds out that's shallow. But still, by doing that, you show there are consequences to earlier events, and you know that matters. That gives everything weight, as opposed to, you know, weightlessness, namelessness, directionless. But then also, you know, again, just like I said about Tormund, where Tormund says to Jon, "No, Jon, I have changed." Mm-hmm. You know, you've got to see that he's changed. When he meets the little girl, when he meets Arya, he should be saying to her, "Arya, I've changed. Like, it's changed me. Like, Arya, you know, like, you should know, like, you know," and whatever terms he put it in, you know. But what, he was supposed to have this.
Her a little bitch or something
it's just awful. The writing is abysmal. But like, you know, remember, we took all this time to show him meeting this family with Arya. And then he comes back later and he sees them as corpses. They've starved to death in the cold or frozen to death. Yeah. They're the corpses in the house. And he tries to give them a funeral, and he says, you know, you deserve better than this, and so on. So this was his big transformation, right?
And now he's up on the castle walls drinking out of a flask.
He's just another hobo. And
drinking out of a
that's
flask.
what all the characters are. The whole script and all the characters in it are listless and aimless. It is objectively bad writing.
Yeah, okay. No, I mean, the biggest thing to me is, what, you know, we were just saying about Davos. The chapters in the Game of Thrones series, those are probably my favorite chapters.
And
so
it seems to be going somewhere too, right? It seems like
it is a shame that his character isn't done justice on the TV show. And I wish that more of the characters
we've never had one word of motivation for him. After Stannis dies, why does he follow Jon Snow? And again, just like I said with Cersei, you could take it to one extreme, you could take it to another. You know, what if Davos's attitude was, I don't care, I've got to serve somebody. Stannis died, well, okay, that's it. Game over for Stannis, but now I'm committing everything I've got to Jon Snow, because that's the kind of guy I am. I just serve whoever's the king. That would be, again, a kind of chilling and weird. And oh, okay. So it wasn't about a personal relationship for you between you and Stannis. You just believe in the authority of command, and that's it. You know, it's so you back Jon Snow. Now, again, that doesn't really work with the plot as they've written it, but that would be one kind of character. Then you have the opposite extreme, where it really is for him based on a personal assessment of that he thinks Jon Snow has some quality where, you know, after Jon Snow was assassinated, that he still believes in this corpse. And it makes no sense. You know, that it's a religion we know he doesn't believe in. That he believes in this religion, bringing this guy back from the dead. And why do you want this guy in charge or anyone else? You know, like, where something has to be worked out, or something, or whatever, something gets reflected on. Or, again, there are like 6 possibilities. Or maybe the only thing he says is, the only chance I've got to ever getting back to my family and seeing my children again is this. So maybe Jon Snow's a terrible person, but the hell with it. But I mean, you got to have high stakes. You got to have commitment. You got to have characters telling you who they are and how they feel for a reason, not standing around listless on a soundstage unpacking their feelings for no reason, you know. But where, you know, I mean, again, that it's suspicious when Varys does that in season 1. Like, well, why are you telling me this? You know, you got to have a reason, you know, for telling people these things, and then hopefully there's some kind of meaningful insight, whether it's political or sociological, when they say those things. Okay, guys, that's a wrap. Episode 3. My expectations are sub-zero.